Elizabeth, welcome to the WP Minute.
Thank you for having me.
I have to say, for all the podcasters out there and for all of the would-be guests to podcast shows, your email outreach was fantastic. I thank you so much. And it is a school, or it's a masterclass in how folks should just reach out like a human, without demands. Like you sent out an email, you said, hey, here's who I am, here's what I do, I've listened to your show, I think I could bring these 3 value points to a podcast. And for somebody who's been doing this for like 15 years, I just got to spend a few minutes saying thanks and appreciating your efforts. So all of that said, who are you and what do you do in the wonderful world of WordPress?
My name is Laura, and I am the founder of a WordPress plugin called Client Portal. It's exactly what it sounds like. There's really no better way to describe it other than it's a portal for clients. So usually freelancers and agencies use it, but we also have accountants, law firms, and that kind of thing. And it just keeps all the deliverables, invoices, all this stuff that tends to get lost in those big, long email threads, just in one place for your client. But I've actually been in WordPress for quite a long time. So I started Client Portal in 2016. And then shortly after I graduated around 2012, during that horrible recession, I started off building WordPress websites as a freelancer. So yeah, I've been in WordPress for quite a long time now.
All right, we have a particular topic. We're going to talk about how you started in like the services side of things and like building websites and then moving to products. My hand up, I did the same thing in the horrible financial crisis of 2007, 2008. I started an agency. And when I started an agency, I was like, hey, this client stuff is fun, but man, I'd rather do a product. That was a whole different world. We're going to talk about that in a moment, but I want to talk about maybe the temperature in the room marketplace wise. Like, how does the economy feel to you these days? We remember the 2007, 2008, 2012. How does it feel for you now that you're squarely in the product space? What does it feel like for you selling products, competing, people with extra cash? Are they consolidating? What's it look like from your perspective?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think in a way it's kind of harder to answer because I've been in it for so long. It seems like a good time to be in it. I know during COVID for me, that was really the best time for me. A lot of people were going from working in a regular job to doing more freelance at home. So for Client Portal, that was really good. And then after COVID, there was the cost of living crisis that happened everywhere, and I definitely felt that. And talking to a lot of other plugin owners, they did too. People were just a bit more hesitant on buying, and maybe like refund rates would kind of go up a little bit. But it feels like it's stabilizing now. It feels like it's getting back to where it sort of feels like it's just getting back to normal. But I would imagine there's also probably a lot more competition, and this is where it's kind of hard because I've been in it for so long. My story of starting might be totally different from someone starting out right now, because I would imagine a lot more competition these days.
Yeah. One of the things, WordPress is in the crosshairs these days. We're recording this mid-October, trying to steer clear from like the hashtag WP drama stuff, but there's a lot of uncertainty in the air, to put it to undersell it. We're not sure where WordPress is headed and how the dust is going to settle. But I think we're both proponents of WordPress because of our backstories. Like, you can take open source WordPress, you can unpack it literally, like you can look at the code because it's open source. You can learn from it. You can say, oh, this is how code works. This is how I learned. Started pulling it apart, building templates, making pages. How does a database work? Like, all this stuff leads to education, I think, in understanding how to code and the greater web. But then it also allows us to sort of spin this services thing. And we can really start to level up our game. I look at WordPress, this is not a direct question, but I'm curious on your thoughts. I look at WordPress as the foundation to, somebody's next career. Like this is the thing. Like, you don't need to go to school. You need WordPress. I know it sounds like, a real lovey-dovey statement these days, but really, like, somebody can unpack it, take it, search for things on the web, then buy, let's say, your product to help power their services business. But this is a springboard to something that's a lot greater than publishing pages on the web. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I completely agree, because the thing about WordPress is that you can, like you said, the barrier to entry is so low. Like, anyone can use it. It's completely open source. But it's also so powerful because there's so many things built on WordPress. If you start out like I did as a freelancer with really not much experience, you're in the position where you're telling clients, oh yeah, I can do that, and then hoping you can figure it out. With WordPress, you can, because there's such a big community. There's so many things that can do what you need them to do. If your client needs e-commerce, you can do that. If your client needs a booking tool, you can do that. Like, it's all available. Whereas if you used different platforms, you'd be a lot more limited, and you might get stuck. So yeah, I agree. I think WordPress is, I can't think of anything that really compares to it.
I guess that's also what makes the marketing of WordPress so difficult. That was another big topic before a lot of this other stuff started to hit the news wire. What is WordPress? Who's it for? There's a strong vocal community of service providers out there, people who are building WordPress websites, and they're saying, give me the tools that I need to build websites. But the essence of WordPress was a blogging and publishing platform. It was about the freedom of publishing words onto the internet, which is also a very important thing in these days, right? To be able to spin something up and communicate and to broadcast this stuff. And then people use it for all kinds of other things, right? They start, turning it into an app. They turn it into a community site. There's so many different layers to WordPress. Do you remember, or did you ever see that and say, okay, this is an opportunity for product? Or did you stumble into product because you were like, oof, this client stuff is starting to weigh down on me a little bit?
So kind of a mixture of both. So I knew that I didn't want to do client work forever. I've always been very big on freedom. So I didn't want a regular job because I didn't want to be tied down working 40 hours a week, for someone else. Half that time is unproductive anyway, but I still would have to sit there. So I wanted to work for myself. Services was kind of the first step to freedom. But then I quickly realized when doing services, you're not really that free. So when I was younger, I did the whole digital nomad thing for a short while. It didn't last very long. But it was really hard because clients would actually expect me to basically be like a 9-to-5 employee. They'd expect to be able to reach me anytime. And, I didn't feel the freedom that I thought I was going to feel. So I knew I needed to get into something else. Where I originally went was actually creating a design course for developers called Design Academy. And basically that came about because with the companies I was working with, I tended to work quite closely with developers. For a bit of background, I'm not a developer myself. So I would work with developers, I'd do the designs, they'd code it. And, I'd get to talking to them, and they'd all of them had a ton of side projects that they were doing. And they wanted to learn a bit about design and how to make their side projects look good enough to get by, but not really turn them into a designer so they could start, selling it. So I saw this kind of gap there, and I thought, oh, that's something I can do because I've experienced that. I know what it's like to not want to be, I never wanted to be an award-winning designer. I just wanted to make things that worked well and looked decent. So I thought that was a really good thing. So I started building my audience around that and creating a course around that. But then Client Portal came about sort of as an accident because it was something that I originally made for myself to use with my clients. So I tried project management tools, and I was really too small for that. Clients didn't want to use it, but I was getting frustrated with the emails coming in sometimes years later asking me for a file that I'd sent them before like 1 million times. Like, can't you just save it or like look yourself? It would get really annoying. So I was like, I just need a portal. So I kind of hacked together this portal and used it with my clients. And at the time I was doing a lot of conference talks, just for no other reason other than really to build my audience, to help with this getting me out of services into products or a course. And some of the conferences I spoke at were for freelancers. I mentioned this portal and I would say, you could do something like this if you've had this problem. And the response was just crazy. People loved it. Like, they wanted to buy it. They were asking me, like, can you just make this into a product so I can buy it? And I ummed and ahed about it for some reason. It should have been obvious. I should have just gone for it. But eventually enough people convinced me to do it. And that's kind of how I got into the product world. So it was intentional and not intentional at the same time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, the website is client-portal.io. We're going to talk about that in more detail in a minute. I want to touch back on the courses stuff. I've always had, like, again, I've done everything too. I've gone from agency to attempting products to doing like media, which I'm doing now. And like, hey, Matt, you never did a course. It just keeps ringing out in my head. Should I steer clear for that? Is that wave over, or is there still some validity in launching course stuff these days?
I think there's a lot of validity in it. I think it's quite, I can't see courses going anywhere. I think I sort of hate to say it's kind of an easy sell in a way, because courses can be a bit of an impulse buy. Software, I think, is a bit more of a commitment. If someone wants to buy software, you tend to subscribe to software, you don't buy it. Whereas you tend to buy a course, it's like a one-time thing usually. So yeah, I definitely think there's a huge market for it still. I know so many people who are course creators doing really, really well with it. And people find it valuable because people want to learn from, people they, look up to and admire, and just get a bit of an inside scoop onto, your knowledge and stuff like that. So yeah, I don't think it's going anywhere.
The wrapper question is, to frame it, is, are you doing any agency work still today? If not, when did you make that complete shift into focusing on just client portal? Like, do you remember the last client or the last project where you're like, I'm done. Like, I'm just going all in on product. So do you still do agency work, dabble in it at all? And if not, like, when did you make that leap?
So I very occasionally dabble in it. I don't have a website for the client work or anything. I actually went full time on Client Portal and Design Academy in 2017, which was a year after I launched Client Portal. But then there's still some clients who have been really long time clients who are really lovely to work with. Pretty much, I think, just two, to be honest. And it's very occasional, maybe like once a year, they might reach out and I'll tend to do something with that. But yeah, no, typically I don't advertise any client work. And for the most part, I would say, no, I don't do client work. The problem with client work is often the communication aspects and dealing with clients. So that can be quite hard. As someone I've worked with before who I know really well, I know that's not going to be an issue. So I don't mind doing some things. And it's, nice to get a little bit of extra padding in the income now and again.
And I'm sure Client Portal itself could lend itself into client services too, right? Like, somebody says, hey, I want to buy this, and maybe I need to brand it, or maybe I need to integrate it into WordPress and it doesn't do a thing. Like, is there ever that attraction at all to have like a professional services install, like so many other enterprise software companies do? Like, I remember buying ClickUp at another company that I worked for. I don't know, like 20 or so seats in ClickUp. And I was like, oh, it's great. It's so much cheaper than Basecamp. It was like $400 a month. And then we signed on and we're like, nobody knows how to use this thing. And then they swooped in and said, don't worry, for $10,000, we'll train you on how to use it and how to set it up. And I was like, where was that in the pricing sheet? Like, I didn't know this was going to happen. So does that level of services ever call you for a Client Portal?
It has in the past, but the only way I've really done that is back before I made it into a WordPress plugin. It was basically a HTML template that was kind of like a pre-order. And I would, say, I'll brand this for you for an extra. It was only an extra, like, few $100s or something. So I've done that. I've thought about, can I offer the service of setting up someone's portal for them? But I haven't done it because I think I would have to charge quite a lot of money for it. there'd be quite a lot of discovery trying to figure out, what they would need in a portal, how it's all set up. And it just doesn't sound like something that I want to do. So I probably won't go down that route, but it's definitely a good idea. And it could, like you say, it could lend it to itself really well. So
as I mentioned earlier, the URL is client-portal.io. Who are the big SaaS enterprise companies that you would compete with? Is it something like a ClickUp or a Basecamp, or is there some enterprise type company that people go, oh, thank God I don't have to spend thousands of dollars here anymore. I can go buy a one site license, from you for $199 a year. Who are the big 800-pound gorillas in the room?
So this is both my favorite question and my least favorite question. I don't really have an answer. From what I can tell, there's a couple of small competitors-ish, but there's no real direct competitors. And I've looked quite hard. It doesn't compete with project management tools because Client Portal actually works quite nicely alongside project management tools. So the difference is if you have a project management tool, I tend to recommend a lot of people are better off using it internally with their team rather than bringing their clients into it, because clients don't use it. They don't want to learn it. It's kind of a mess. But team-wise, if you've got like an agency and you've got a team, I think they're really useful. Client Portal is kind of an add-on to that just gives the client just one separate area that they can see just their deliverables. So it's a really simple product, and every single competitor, I would say, that aren't really competitors, do a lot more than that and are more in the project management space, I would say. But Client Portal is not intended for that. It's like, but that's also what people love about it. They don't want a big project management tool that does everything. They already use, Google Docs and all the software stack that they already have. They like that. They just want somewhere to keep it all together, so there's just not links and files flying around everywhere.
And it's not just agencies, not just freelancers. On the Who We Help tab on your website, it's a great website, by the way. Agencies, schools, law firms, accountants, coaches could get you feeling like you're getting pulled in maybe many directions with feature requests. You mentioned earlier that you're not a developer. We can talk about that in a moment, like how this whole product part came to life. But how do you balance maybe the requests from, oh my God, law firms? I can only imagine what they're asking for, versus a school who, it's about maybe helping children and getting the information in front of parents. So how do you balance the feature requests from these different markets?
Yeah, it's actually not as difficult as it sounds because I have a very clear idea of what Client Portal is and what it isn't. There's really no features that I would do that are very specific to one particular industry. If I was going to go all in, for example, on accountants, I might add some new features that would be more applicable to them. But really, it's for anyone who needs a place for clients or customers or people to see links to things, just URLs, files, need to be able to upload files and see information, just in pages, just in one simple portal. And, that simplicity can actually translate to any industry. We have a crazy amount of industries that use Client Portal. We've got like marine biologists and like furniture shops and like just the craziest kind of stuff, which from a marketing perspective does make it a little bit difficult, because when so many people use it, it's hard to speak to everybody at the same time.
Yep.
But the biggest group by far is definitely freelancers and agencies and, consultants and that kind of thing still.
When you started putting the concept together, you were exiting services. You're like, okay, this is the thing I want to focus on. You started to build it and people saw it. How did you start to really polish up like the code and the development part of it? Did you hire somebody from a freelance contractor? Did you outsource to another agency? How did you start building the actual tech part of this solution?
Yeah, so this was tricky for me because, as I said, I'm not a developer. And so what I needed to do was I needed to raise money to hire a developer to make it into a plugin. So what happened was I was speaking at one conference in particular, And the response was really good for this client portal. They went round at the end and said, what was the biggest takeaway from this conference? And more than 50% of the people who answered said Laura's client portal idea, it's really good. So the organizer, I guess, saw something there and said, if you want to make this into a product, I'd be happy to promote it for you. And so I decided to do some pre-sales. So I say, okay, you can, you went to the conference, you saw this, and if you want to buy it, then you can have the HTML template, the CSS how it is at the minute, and a little PDF tutorial on, how to put it on your website. But the idea is that I am doing this in order to invest in a developer to turn it into a WordPress plugin. And it wasn't necessarily going to be a WordPress plugin at the start, but I asked people what they would prefer, and everyone just said WordPress plugin. So I knew I'd sort of went around into some other groups that I was in looking for a developer to just get a quote, because I wanted to see how much I'd need to make from the pre-sales in order to do it. It's kind of like a Kickstarter in that, like, if I didn't manage, I'd either have to put my own money into it or refund them, which I didn't want to do. And I found a developer who had already heard of the client portal idea. And similar to what you were saying with the outreach email, actually, like, everyone replied with the most kind of generic response. Sometimes it would just be a number this one actually just replied with something a bit more personal, saying, oh, she'd been following me for a while and she'd heard about it and all this kind of stuff. So I thought, okay, she sounds great. So she quoted me, I can't remember, it was probably about $3,000 or $4,000 or something. And then I did the pre-order, and it made about $10,000, which was more than I needed to put the plugin into action. So, I hired her, got it made into a plugin, and then kind of went from there. And she's actually still works on Client Portal to this day. Not full time, she's still a contractor, but she's worked on it since the first version in 2016 to right now, which is 2024. So yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. It's really not that hard, right? To to just be like a human and ask, like, hey, like your stuff, like, hey, man. And I don't know if it's just that's definitely not the WordPress world, because I I grew up in sales and stuff like that. But certainly in the WordPress world, it's just like a lot of, here's my thing, go promote it. And, wouldn't it be great if you got a 25% affiliate commission on that? See you later, bye. And it's just like, where's the human in this stuff, right? It's bad enough we got AI knocking on our door. Can't you people be just a little bit nicer these days?
Yeah. Well, AI has kind of made it worse, because now it's getting somewhat personal, but you can still tell it's not. It's like the copy and paste what you've written in your bio in a DM. And you're kind of like, it's closer, but no, it's just, and it's not that hard. It is time consuming, but it's not that time consuming. And
right.
Yeah, it's just surprising.
Speaking of AI, how do you evolve this software? Do you have integrations? Are you thinking about something like integrating AI like so many other people are? Like, how do you think about maybe instead of competing or not really finding that competitor that we were talking about earlier, but maybe integrating into other platforms, pulling in data? Do you do that now? How do you think about that evolution of the software?
Interestingly, I haven't thought about AI and how it could be used in the product at all. It's probably worth thinking about, to be honest. I have quite a clear roadmap in my head of where I want the product to go. So the big thing is, I'd really love Zapier integration, so I can, pull in an indefinite amount of software and tools that can work with Client Portal. But we've been really focused on, we redid Client Portal from the ground up. Did it take 2 years? It took a really long time, but we did it with the block editor. So it's now completely uses the block editor, and it was such a big project, and it is still ongoing because the block editor changes all the time. I don't think we were expecting it to be as big a project as it was, but it's really nice now, because before it was like your typical WordPress plugin where it's just kind of a bunch of fields and nothing looks like how it looks on the front end. And now when you're editing a portal, you're editing it exactly how it's going to look to the client, which is just super nice. So I'm really happy with it. But I think we've been so focused, honestly, on that I haven't even thought about how AI could benefit Client Portal at all. But I'm sure it could in some way.
Yeah. It's funny. I didn't spend any time on it. I bookmarked it because I do want to go back to it. But I saw a bunch of creators yesterday And I could tell this was like a campaign, like a marketing campaign, and nothing against it. I just happened to, as somebody who's in marketing, realizing that it's a campaign that's happening in front of my eyes, where a bunch of creators started talking about this new like AI accounting tool, and I went to the website and I started looking at it, and it's like, oh yeah, you just sync up your, inbox and your payment stuff, and AI goes and figures out all like your business receipts and trains it and figures out your expenses. And even if you're using your personal card, it'll switch it over. Like, I'm reading it, I'm like, that's it. Like, first of all, there's no way, like, I can't even get Claude or ChatGPT to properly edit like a WordPress blog post because it doesn't know the industry like I know. So I can't even really reliably use that tool for writing. This is not going to work. And I don't trust it because what's it doing with all of like my financial data? And I just like laughed it off, but I see all these people talking about it. It's just wild AI. Not a question, but just like my observations of like, and my distrust for like early AI onset tools is a little scary.
Well, the accounting example is good because I do think it would be nice. There's so much with accounting that is just tedious that I feel like could be done with AI. But I find myself thinking now, are the accountants that I'm using, like, are they going to start using AI? Like, am I going to know? Right. Do I need to be more proactive in checking things over? Because the thing I hate about accounting, I'm sure you do too, is that, all this stuff happens behind the scenes. You're not a tax expert, but at the end of the day, you have to put your signature at the end of it and sign it all off. And it's just terrifying because you really don't know. Like, you can't look at everything. So I'm just kind of wondering, like, are they doing that? Are they going to do that? Is it going to screw everything up, or is it going to be great? Or I don't know.
Yeah. In terms, and just one other note too about like software development, especially in the WordPress world, you mentioned how you are evolving the product to use, blocks and like the site editor kind of experience, and how fast that rapidly changes, which is another like contention in the WordPress space, is that you have so many people that are like end users who are saying, where's the next feature? Why is this so slow to iterate? What's happening? But for us developers in the back end who are trying to keep a product, on parity with that stuff, it is changing rapidly in the back end and how it's all working. So it's hard to push like front end features when there's still so much uncertainty on the back end compatibility of this stuff. My day job is at Gravity Forms, and we get a ton of requests from folks who are like, hey, why can't I build this form in the block editor, move fields around like the blocks and stuff in the block editor using Gutenberg? It's just like, whoa. We've been in business for 15 years. There's so many people in use cases that use this product. We can't just say, okay, we'll just take the latest Gutenberg version and slap it into, Gravity Forms, and it's just going to work fine for, millions of WordPress sites out there. A lot of folks just don't realize like this underpinning stuff is moving kind of quickly with a lot of uncertainty in the back end of WordPress. The front end, maybe not so much, but the back end, certainly there's some turbulence.
Yeah, I definitely feel that. And it's like you say, like, I feel like we haven't pushed as many new features as before, but we're not working any less because, Gutenberg and everything, every feature that we already have in Client Portal, it works now slightly differently. So, we spent a long time testing it all. But as you know, with WordPress, everyone has different setups. So we found issues if you have a non-block editor theme, or, all these different things that kind of cropped up that we thought when we had the classic editor, we'd sort of ironed out. It's kind of like now we're ironing them out again. And then for every single feature we've got like a WooCommerce integration, and then WooCommerce recently changed and it kind of broke everything. So we're like, okay, now we've got to fix this. And it's just like, it feels like it's not going to end. But if you look at like our changelog and stuff, and I, write like a quarterly email with, things that have happened, we've done a lot. It's not very marketing worthy things that we're doing, but they're needed. They're necessary. Like I couldn't in good conscience ship a new feature without having these basic things sorted. So it's difficult for now.
Once again, the URL is client-portal.io. Starts at $199 for a single site, $399 for a unlimited site license to use across multiple sites. What's the biggest advantage? If somebody's out there and they're a freelancer, they've got a dozen plus customers, things are getting a little bit unruly, they purchase Client Portal. What do you think the immediate win is for that freelancer out there doing a bunch of things with their clients? They're sending them to ClickUp, they're sending them a Google Doc, they're sending them a e-signature platform. What's the big win for Client Portal for that use case?
Yeah, so one thing that I hear constantly as the big win is that they just look and feel a lot more professional. They like how Client Portal makes them look. What's really nice about the fact that it's a WordPress plugin and not a SaaS is that it's completely on your website. It's pretty easy to brand, so it can look like, it doesn't look like Client Portal. It can look like an extension of your website. And just having something that you can give clients when you first onboard them seems to give people quite a lot of confidence in their process, because they can buy portals. So if they use WooCommerce, what you can do if you're a freelancer, you can have your deposit or something go through WooCommerce. This is great if you have like productized services. And then when they pay, their portal is already set up for them with all their onboarding documents, the intake questionnaires already loaded in. It's like private for them. And it's just like a really nice experience. But yeah, I think that's like the number one thing we hear is that it's made them feel a lot more confident and feel a lot more professional with their clients.
Is that, sorry, one other technical question. Is that like an integration that happens with, let's say, WooCommerce, the purchase happens and that unlocks the membership account for them or the client dashboard account for them? Is that how that works? Or is there some other like trigger happening?
Yeah, it's pretty much just straight with WooCommerce. We only have WooCommerce at the minute, but we'd love to integrate, directly with like Stripe or something like that. So yeah, when you buy, you can either get added to a portal with lots of other people in. So, you can technically, it's not courseware, but you can use it as a very lightweight courseware platform. I don't really market it as courseware, to be honest, because, it doesn't have like learner management and things like that. But, if you had, a educational guide, for example, that you wanted to sell as like an add-on to your clients, they could all be added to that same portal when they buy in WooCommerce. If they get refunded, they'll lose access to it. Or you can choose for them to have their own individual portal set up that's completely private for them. So it's got, just the onboarding documents, and the rest of the project that isn't filled in still shows in the portal, but it's kind of grayed out so the client knows that this is what's coming. They just can't, access it yet because it's not in there. So it's pretty flexible and it's pretty nice.
Awesome stuff. Everyone listening, client-portal.io. Laura Elizabeth, thanks for hanging out with us today and letting us know who you are and what you do in the WordPress space. Anywhere else you want folks to go to learn a little bit more about you?
Pretty much the only place I'm remotely active on is Twitter or X. So you can find me on there at Laura Eliz Dunn. So ELIZ, just half my middle name, Dunn, DUNN. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Client Portal and X.
Awesome stuff. Everybody else, thewpminute.com, thewpminute.com/subscribe. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.